Hey everyone. The following conversation is between me and Nash Sisk. We talk about philosophy, individual choice, happiness or meaning, and the meaning crisis itself. I hope you enjoy. This was one of my favorite conversations I've had so far.
I think just to start out, if you could just give everybody your name, maybe your credentials if you have anything like that, and then we can kind of get some background on you if that's okay.
Hmm.
And so people can kind of get to know you a little bit better before we jump into other things, if that works for you.
Yeah,
So, who are you?
yeah. So my name's Nash. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee.
Hmm.
I grew up a little bit outside of the city, like 30, 45 minutes out in the country. Uh, so grew up there, and then I went to undergrad at Boston College,
Hmm.
uh, and I majored in philosophy there. Started off as a physics major. Really loved it. I was always a big math and science guy, but I just found that I didn't want to go into research later in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So I did philosophy as my major. I just graduated last year, and then came out here to Colorado. It was like my senior year, and I was talking to my professor. Didn't really know what I wanted to do, and he told me, "Well, I know this program in Colorado, and you could go there, and you could get your master's degree for free, and you get paid to do it."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Wow, that sounds really great." So it's free tuition. I get a TA stipend. It's pretty decent. And then I go out in the mountains all the time. Like
Yeah.
I go hiking, backpacking, camping about every weekend, every other weekend. So love the outdoors here. And yeah, I'm doing my philosophy master's here and planning on going to law school afterwards. Was
Okay.
just studying for the LSAT before I came here.
How does philosophy play into law?
They're very synergistic with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Because the essential skills that you need to be a successful lawyer are good logic,
Yeah.
good logical
Mm.
reasoning. You have to be able to pick apart people's arguments and be able to craft your own arguments. Uh, you have to be able to understand really dense and difficult texts.
Yeah.
And these are shared between philosophy and law in they're all of them are the central skills you need for both of them. So philosophy majors are they score the highest on the LSAT
Hmm.
out of any majors, them and physics majors. And it's been shown. I've been doing pretty well on my practice tests. Yeah, I'm looking to get a pretty good score on it.
Nice. Do you think that a lot of our now common law is in part deriven from philosophy from old?
Definitely, there's a lot of influence there. Uh, our focus on justice, I
Mm.
think, very much comes from the ancient Greek philosophers, from Plato and Aristotle, because they thought that justice was the cardinal virtue, that it was what was most important to practice as an individual and as a society that would create the most flourishing society for all people. And then there's a very long line of political philosophers throughout history and the Enlightenment. Uh, you have Thomas Aquinas in the medieval age, who worked on his theory of natural law,
Mm-hmm.
and that was extremely influential in British common law, which was what we inherited for our
Yeah.
legal system.
Yeah.
And then you have tons of philosophers like Montesquieu and John Locke and Rousseau, who are all doing this political philosophy and talking about how we should best order society. And always in that, what laws we should have is a central question. So definitely philosophy has been very influential in
Mm-hmm.
the legal system that we've inherited today.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have a particular school of philosophy that really synergizes with you personally that you identify with?
So what I've liked to read a lot is I really like the ancient Greek philosophers.
Mm.
I love Plato, especially Plato. I like Aristotle a lot too. Um, I like the existentialists, although as I've studied the existentialists more, and these are people like from like the 20th century, like Sartre and de Beauvoir. Um, as I've started to learn them a little bit more, there's a lot about them that I like, but I'm starting to see the problems in their philosophy.
Mm.
Essentially, the extreme emphasis they have on how everything that you do is your own individual responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's something that I believed in my life at times, but I can also see the limitations of it. So I
Okay.
like the existentialists. And then I also like the people who are really interested in questions about metaphysics.
Mm.
Questions about what is the nature of reality and what is the nature of being.
What is metaphysics exactly?
Metaphysics
say?
is it's the study of what reality truly is beneath its appearances.
Okay.
Or some would argue that appearance is reality.
Mm.
But so it's questions like, what is it that makes things the same thing? Like we call all trees a tree, and we believe that they're all the same thing. What is it about trees that underlies all of them that makes them a tree? So we're looking at like the metaphysical essence of what a tree is. So that's like one of the questions you think about.
Okay. So what is like actually the structure of reality
Yeah.
in almost practicality, right?
Right.
Like the actual qualities that we, and there is like a dynamic of what we perceive, right? Because that's all that we have, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of comes into play with that philosophy as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where do you think ideas of individualism goes wrong?
So what the existentialists say
Yeah.
about individual responsibility is that if we're being really honest with ourselves, we have to say that all of our actions and all of our beliefs and all of our values are our own responsibility because they are ours. Because they believe radically that we have a free will, that we can do within a limited situation, because we're always just thrown into a limited situation. The life that you're born into, the genetics that you have, how tall you are, if you're introverted or extroverted, you're always thrown into that situation. They know that you don't really choose that per se. But within that situation that we're thrown into, they say that all of your choices within that are freely willed choices. And so, I think I didn't. I could have swore I turned my phone off. Oh, I did. That's the texts. That they're all freely willed within that situation. But none of them would say that this is like that this leads to kind of like pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality of like everything you do is like your own conscious decision, like you thought about everything. They're saying from, I guess it would almost be like an external perspective, that if we observe an individual person, we say that everything they do is their own action, they're responsible for it. I think the limitation of that, I wouldn't say that that's wrong. I wouldn't say that's false. I just say it's not entirely correct. It's not entirely true. And that's because when you think about your life in that way, I think it leads you to see your own living in an obscured way. And to think that everything, at least what it's done for me, is that everything you do and believe should be a conscious, controlled choice. And that you should be able to will yourself into being anything. That you should be able to basically create your own values. You should be like, if I think that I'm trying to think of a non-super controversial topic. If I think that,
Like deciding to go to the gym in the morning.
Yeah.
Would that be a good example?
That's good. Yeah, that is. So if I think that I should go to the gym in the morning, then I think that I should just be able to consciously will myself to do that
Mm-hmm.
no matter what. That I should just be able to make myself start valuing going to the gym. But it doesn't quite work like that, because you can consciously say and will in your mind, like, I want to go to the gym, but then when it comes to it, you don't actually want to go. You just want to lay in bed in the morning and just sleep a little while longer. And so then I think that leads to people feeling inadequate in a way.
Yes.
Is that, if I am the author of all my actions,
Yeah.
then I should be able to consciously will myself to go to the gym, but I'm not able to, so that means there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
And I think that it's just simply that way of seeing things that isn't quite fully right.
So I would say that maybe a statement like that took one step too far with saying there's like something wrong with me. And when I hear that, like my DNA or like I'm a bad person or something like that, right, is what I hear with that. And I would say where that statement is going right is that they made that decision to not go to the gym, and that means that there was two paths they could be on. They could be in the path that slept an extra hour, or in the path that hit the weights at 6 a.m. and then was ready for their day and could go to work and or whatever from there, right? And I would say, depending on the decision in this particular one, if it's gym or no gym, and you just sleep in, then the person that stays in bed is more inadequate than the person that went to the gym. And I'd say that would hold true until the extent that they were going to the gym in excess to where then it was a detriment to them. But then when we're talking about an action that is now statistically shown and just like anecdotally with how people feel afterwards to be very beneficial for longevity's sake and your health and mental development and all kinds of stuff like that, right? That it would have made them a slightly better person. And it is like who gets to decide what a better person is, but like just looking at a person that chooses to go to the gym and not, I would say that the one going to the gym kind of gets all these extra benefits from the gym other than just the muscle, but also just the discipline of waking up at 6 a.m. and coming through and everything like that. And I'd say just like technically, then yeah, you are a less adequate person for not going to the gym. And everything can be in excess. Don't do it 5 hours a day every single day and run your body into the ground, but done for the average person like 3 times a week or something like that, that's been shown to be very good, right? And so it's, to me, it like reflects on our hierarchy of decisions that we can choose. And to me, that decision to go to the gym was a higher order decision compared to the lower order of maybe staying in bed for maybe a couple hours. And you could have, and there's nuance to things. You could have used that time to maybe to work on a homework assignment, and that would have been good for you. You know, there's more nuance. You can throw it in when you talk about somebody's life, but like just on the black and white issue of like gym, no gym, I would make the argument personally that that was an inadequate decision to stay home comparatively.
Right, I agree with you. I agree with you that the person who decided to go to the gym made a better decision, a healthier decision, a decision that is more reflective of a disciplined, good character than the person who decided to stay in bed and lay around all day. I agree with you there. And the existentialists would say that, well, taking that perspective of looking at these two different people, well, we're going to say that each of them chose and decided to do that because, well, this one is the one that went to the gym. This one is, and so they, in that way, they chose to go to the gym. This one is the one that stayed in bed. And that way, they chose and are responsible for staying in bed. The limitation that I'm trying to get at is how people approach getting out of making bad decisions.
Mm.
How people think about how they need to be able to get themselves to the point of being able to go to the gym. And maybe a little more obvious example might help us think about this. Think about depression.
Okay.
When somebody's depressed, they can't just tell themselves, oh, stop being depressed. They can see all of these things that should make them happy and should be meaningful to them. They think, oh, well, I should see getting up in the gym and being healthy as something meaningful, as something that makes me happy. I should see going out with my friends and having fun with them as something that should make me happy. But so for some reason, it just doesn't. It all just kind of passes through me and never really fills me with any happiness or any meaning. Well, and I don't think this probably isn't what the existentialists are actually saying, but this is at least how and I think a lot of other people have interpreted what we've drawn from them in our popular culture,
Mm-hmm.
is that, well, I should be able to just will myself. I should just be able to decide to start seeing those as meaningful and happy. And I think that we see that doesn't work. You can't just will yourself to stop being depressed, no matter how much you think about how you should feel. You can't make yourself feel that way. And I think when we get this misinterpretation of that everything is my own personal choice, we get locked in that perspective where, and that's what I mean by kind of inadequacy, is like they feel helpless.
Yeah.
Is that, well, I'm just not somebody who can choose to be happy.
Yeah.
I'm just somebody who has to be depressed because I can't choose to not be.
Yeah. I see that definitely reflective in the general population. From a personal perspective, that school of thought has been very liberating for me. There's been moments where I've had my half second, I call it, of depression, and then I just get over it and do something about it. And that personally has worked very well for me. I'm not saying that works for everybody, but it kind of, for me, it runs contrary to what you're saying. But if we talk about things in the general perspective, then obviously it gets different. For me personally, I mean, I put a lot of work into trying to get people on, like, as an example, I try to get a lot of people onto this to speak with them and stuff like that. And I've had cancellations, as you do, because making plans is very hard, right? I'm not mad at that part, but there's a lot of work that goes into setting it up. And then there's a lot of people that come on, and I've spent time preparing questions and being prepared for them to come on, especially if there's a particular issue we're going to come cover. And then last second I get a cancellation, and I get a bit of that feeling of sadness and depression. And maybe it's not real depression. It isn't clinical depression, because that's over many months.
I would say the difference is depression is a self-reinforcing system.
Yeah.
It's like its own independent system within you that sucks the happiness out of the things you do into it. Whereas a little disappointment like this is something that vanishes quite quickly as you move on with your life.
Yeah. It's something you get habituated to, right? Would that be a fair word to use?
Yeah.
And so for me, though, I could have spent all day like worrying about if it was me that made them cancel, or all these different worries can creep in, right? Instead, though, and I've been trying to practice this very quickly, just turning around and saying, okay, now I have 2 hours for free. What can I do for this? I can write, I can read, I can watch something educational, I can play video games, I can do something with the time instead of worry about it, is where my head goes to. And it puts all the burden on me of what to do within my decisions. And personally, that's been very liberating. I was going to connect to something else and I lost it. And so what I said earlier is that's something I've been trying to practice. That's been something that I've been trying to make a habit. And so for me, when you get into those negative feedback loops, then that's what can sometimes lead to depression, is what that makes me think of, right? And the opposite is a positive feedback. Well, a positive feedback loop is the addition of something, so you can have that positively reinforce something that is negative within your life, right? Feeling bad about feeling bad is something that can loop
Yeah.
itself, right? Or feeling good about feeling good. It's the positive part is just an addition to the loop, right? When it kicks back around. And depression is just a positive feedback loop that has reinforced that sad feeling over
Negative
months and
emotions,
months,
yeah.
right? And you need a negative feedback cycle to kind of stop that addition of sadness, to kind of put a barrier up for it, right? If
Yeah.
you talk about the systematics of it almost.
Yeah, so what you were saying is the helpfulness of taking responsibility for your actions and your path in life. That's right. That is very helpful, and that's how I've seen things for most of my life. Only up until very recently have I been experimenting with trying to take a different perspective on things.
Okay.
Because you're right that in everyday life, that is very helpful. Being able to saying, I'm responsible for getting myself up in the morning and going to the gym and going to classes and doing well and focusing on studying and trying to succeed and become a better person. What I have found the limitation on that recently is when you're in a state like depression, when you're trapped in this self-reinforcing pattern.
Yeah. The cycle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at many times in my life, I've tried to use that, well, I'm responsible for it. I just have to will myself and get myself to think the right thoughts and do the right things. And then that'll free me from this entrapment.
Yeah.
But I found that that doesn't work. That I can know what I should do. I can know say that I give too much attention to people who don't care about me, and that I try and be friends with them, even though I can tell they don't want to be friends with me. Say I do that, and say I realize this, and I see, wow, I should really stop doing that. This is how this is how I should act. I should only give attention to the people who value my time. And then I'll have a conversation with myself about that, and I'll say, this is how I should start acting. This is what I should be on the lookout for. And then I'll say, okay, well, good. I've decided that this is what I'm going to do now, so I guess problem's fixed. And then I'll go some time, and I'll be in a situation like that again, where I see, it seems like I have a sense, like, it seems like this person doesn't really value my time, but I still want to be friends with them. Well, let me just try harder. And then I totally forget that whole conversation I had with myself, because I've re-entered this situation that has activated this pattern of me giving attention to people who don't value my time. It's activated this pattern, and now I'm stuck in it, and I can't see outside of it because I'm stuck in it. Even though there was a time when I could look down at it and see what it was, now that it's been activated, I'm trapped in it again, and I can't get myself out of it.
Yeah.
I can't will myself out of it. I can't think myself out of it. I can't decide to stop doing it. And so I've seen this with
Yeah.
examples like this throughout my life, where I've come to this realization and I decide to get out of it, but I still fall right back into it because it's this positive feedback loop. It's this self-reinforcing process. And so what I've been experimenting with very lately, only in the past few months in my life, is how can I take a perspective that actually allows me to get out of that? And my thoughts on it are only fairly vague right now, but it's mainly just been asking for help. When I talk to myself, just phrasing it as, it's not that I've decided to stop giving my attention to people who don't value my time, but I say, please help me stop giving my attention to people who don't value my time. I don't say I decided, I just say, help me. And then, I don't know, it seems as I've started framing things that way, that the help has started to come to me. It's just revealed itself to me. It's like as I've opened myself up to listening for help, something speaks to me. And then I have an insight into how not just in words what I need to do, but how I need to, I guess you could say, feel how I
Yeah.
should act in these situations.
Is it more instinctual for you almost, or
Basically like that, yeah.
it's like what comes to mind to me is like it's like a conscious unconscious that calls you.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? Kind of.
I think that would be a good way to think about it, yeah.
'Cause
It's almost like I'm opening myself up to my unconsciousness.
Yeah.
My conscious mind is the one that's saying, I decide, I will this.
Yeah.
But then I open my consciousness up to my unconscious, and from the depths it speaks to me.
Yeah.
And gives me some help.
To me, it's like if you're religious, a form of prayer.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly that too.
Yeah. Are you religious, like personally?
I am in a difficult way. I have every day I'm struggling with my belief.
Yeah.
I was raised as a Christian in a Protestant family in the South, and then in high school I started learning science. It was my parents raised me in not quite fundamentalist, but kind of a very simplistic form of Christianity, where everything the Bible says is exactly true, unmetaphorically. There really were two people at the beginning of time who just popped into existence from God's creation. We all came from that. 7,000, world's 7,000 years old, all that. And then I got in high school and I started learning science and about all the things we know today, and I was like, wow, all of that is so entirely wrong. So Christianity is just a whole bunch of BS.
Yeah.
I'm just going to give up on all this. That launched me into a really long phase of nihilism, of just like eventually coming to feel that nothing really had any meaning, that there was no purpose to anything in life. Even anything that I would feel would be purposeful was totally meaningless. And then throughout time, I slowly started to try and reapproach my religious faith. And it was a feeling of coming home, but I knew I couldn't go back to the kind of simplistic belief that my parents brought me up with. And so for, I guess it's been 3 years now, I've been really struggling with trying to see what Christianity and the Bible is trying to tell us. Because what it's trying to tell us is a lot is how to live a good life, how to orient yourself in the world so that you can be a good person, and so that you can feel at peace within yourself and help other people reach that as well. And so the story from the Bible that really speaks to me the most is the story of Isaac.
Okay.
And he's in a turbulent time in his life, and he goes to lay down one night, and he's sleeping, and it's not. They don't say it's a dream. It seems like it might be a dream, but it's written as if it happened. Is that an angel came to him, and all night he wrestled with the angel, and the angel touched him on his hip and dislocated his hip. And in extreme pain, he says, I will not stop until you bless me. And then the angel blesses him. And then that's when his name is changed from Isaac to Israel, and it said, you will be father of nations. And so that's, the story is that he's struggling with God. He's struggling with one of God's angels, fighting with it, trying to pull it down and pin it down.
Yeah.
And it hurts him so deeply to be in the struggle. But he says, I will not stop until you bless me.
Yeah.
That's the story I identify with most, because I'm struggling with my faith.
Yeah.
And trying to fit it into my life in a way that I feel matches with the truths that I found in science and in philosophy and elsewhere. And I'm not going to settle for the doctrines and the things that have been passed on that people say you have to believe this.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with that, and I won't stop until I find a way to truthfully fit it into my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What do you think kind of circling back, when I was talking about the feedback cycles, to me that connects back to Matthew's law or the Pareto principle. Are you familiar?
I know the Pareto principle. It's in any kind of domain, generally, you can take statistical measurements that there will be some kind of 80-20 rule.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it just connects. It's nicknamed Matthew's law because it connects to out the text from Matthew. Those who have
Oh,
more,
right.
more will be given, and those who have less, less will be taken, or more will be taken away.
Yeah.
And that to me comes to mind when we're talking about the individualism stuff. Those that choose those higher order decisions generally do better and they get more, is what it seems to be in the state of like reality itself. Almost, it seems sometimes, like even out of people's own will, right? And like even you making the decision of like, no, you're not using these words, but in a sense like, bless me with a solution to my problem right now, right? And even the act of looking to something that's higher order and that connected unconsciousness is something I think maybe you're trying to connect and tap into, right? And that's a decision in itself of trying to connect to the higher order. And I think that's analogous to going to the gym in the sense of doing something that's above you, right? Trying to, because when you go to the gym, you chase something that's not who you are now, you chase who you could be, right? You chase that person that's 5 pounds heavier and can lift heavier weights, right? So you're chasing your higher order self that could be possible, right? If you read a book correctly, you kind of try to take out from it what you could learn and implement into your own life, and then develop that higher order self that comes out of these different experiences that we have, right? And so those in itself to me are influence these cycles, right? And they influence these patterns that give 80% of different things to 20% of people. And people will say like, did they deserve those things? And it's not even like a deserving issue. It's just like, it seems like that's the structure of things on how it's set up, right? I think one of the issues, I believe in capitalism, but I think one of the issues that it's going to have to figure out in the next few decades is what to do about that state of reality itself, right? Right now we kind of have an issue of a lot of resources winding up in few hands and more than what they know what to do with, and less to many that need more, right, in general. And I still believe in like working for your check, but at the same time there seems to be an imbalance here, right?
Right.
And so all these things kind of interconnect and relate, right? And to me, I think they all kind of fall to the hands of Matthew's law and the Pareto principle with, I mean, because that kind of connects to individual efforts and decisions and then broader economic national decisions, right? So
Yeah, it is startling how often the Pareto principle applies. And what you're saying, that yes, when you start making these higher order better decisions for yourself to be a better person, well then you start becoming a better person. And a better person is able to make better decisions, they're more competent, more capable, and it's a positive feedback loop for positive outcomes. And for people who do not have, who are stuck in a negative feedback loop, they keep losing more and more.
yeah. And there's no judgment there. It's not good or bad. It just seems to be that's the way things are,
Yeah.
right? And we can try to like maybe curb society that things work a bit against that so that it's not so stark, maybe. I'm still trying to figure out exactly what that means and what that looks like, but it's definitely something I've observed, you know?
Right. Definitely one of the difficulties that we're starting to see with capitalism, and I don't think it's been a problem in humanity's past, because before there were that like feudal system, you had the king and the aristocrats who had quite a bit of wealth, but not so much that they could give it to the rest of the country and raise them all out of poverty. They'd barely make a difference if they gave up their wealth. They weren't that extravagantly rich compared to everybody else. But now, with how many resources we've created with capitalism, the immense surplus we've created, and still the same principle applies.
Mhm.
But now it's such that the people who have that 80%, who are getting all of these surplus resources, have become so extravagantly wealthy that they really would be able to bring basically the whole country out of poverty if they gave up their wealth.
Yeah.
So I don't think this is a problem we've ever faced before.
Hmm.
And so now we're dealing with what seems to be a natural law that is still operating as it always has been, and that we've never really had to have a problem with before. But now we see, well, we could do things differently. If we could do things differently, how should we do them differently?
Yeah.
Should we take away all of these things, that this extravagant surplus that these people have earned by the choices and the work that they've done? And should we help everybody else with it, or do we just keep going the way we've always done it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Not a question I have an answer
Yeah,
to.
me neither. But it's something at least I think good to observe, and the more eyes on it, maybe the more perspectives you could get on it, is my take, I guess. So it's something to definitely think about. But
Yeah, I'm definitely.
It's
happy
way
we
beyond,
have
like,
a
our-
lot of people working on a solution to that problem.
yeah, it is beyond me of like what to do about that. Some people would say tax the rich. Other people would say give them less taxes because then they might be more charitable. There's put incentive programs for charitable giving. There's all kinds of ideas, but somehow we got to figure out how to test those things. Maybe it would be maybe the safest bet.
Yeah, definitely. I think that, I don't know, with something like universal basic income, is we should definitely, we've got great science. We should use the great science that we have to experiment on small scales and see what effects that has.
Yeah.
We shouldn't just say, okay, national universal basic income, let's just see what happens. That's a slapstick solution that we don't know what will result from.
Yeah.
Rather,
Yeah.
we should maybe do like one city where we do universal basic income and really closely monitor it for like 5 years, 10 years, say probably like 5 years. See what happens. See, do people still, because one of the big worries is that people won't want to work if they have basic income.
Yeah.
It's like, so, okay, well, let's observe and do experiments and see, we give people like a minimum wage basic income, do they still go to work? Or do we have extreme unemployment problems? So I think definitely when we're going to be looking at creating large-scale economic and social change like that, we should use the great science that we have to experiment and see how it works at a small scale.
Yeah. My question would be relating to kind of the college debt that we have now, because what we saw, in my interpretation of it, is that once government started giving loans out to people to help them get education, what seemed like a good intervention to have, right? Universities easily saw that there's now more cash flow flowing into students coming in, and so then you can easily more justify raising prices because you knew that there's more money filtering down under, right? And so I thought about this, and I was trying to connect that to, well, with universal basic income, would that just make companies more likely to raise prices on different products because they know that more money is coming from government down to people, and then people buying those products now have more money to pay for higher priced goods? So then would it just filter back up into the higher class, right?
Right.
Was my thought
Yeah,
of
that's another big potential danger.
that's where, like, a study, I'd be curious what they would say to like a statement or theory like that I have,
Yeah, because if everybody suddenly has the same amount of more money, then will that just result in price hikes across everything, inflation everywhere?
And it's all relative, right? We kind of saw a soft example of this with the money that was given out during the pandemic, right? And it helped a lot of people pay their bills and stuff like that. But then you look at who owns the building, who owns the infrastructure, who owns the baby food that they bought for their kids, and while it helped them in the short term and they were able to pay these bills, who owns the apartment they live in and all that stuff? And it's just more rich people, right? And because they own all those things. And I'm not saying it's a tricky situation to say the least, right?
It's not a long-term solution.
It doesn't seem like it.
To the problem of wealth inequality.
Yes.
Because it seems like the people who really need universal basic income and would get the money from it will spend their money in ways that it just filters back up to the top.
Yeah.
Because so one of my best friends, he's big finance, economics guy. He was talking about how the people in the different classes value spending their money on things that tend to keep them there. He says that the wealthy people happen to value spending their money on things that keep them wealthy. Because what do wealthy people like to buy? They like to buy houses. They like to buy land.
Yeah.
They like to buy investments. They like to spend their money on things that make them more money.
Yeah.
Well, what do people in the middle class like to buy? They like to buy a lot of cars. They like to buy nice, flashy technology. They like to buy a lot of vacations. None of these make you more money. They're all money sinks.
Yeah, depreciating assets.
Yeah, you drive your car off the lot and it's already, like 75% of its previous value?
Yeah.
Investing in cars is never going to make you money. And then people in lower classes as well, and buying nice clothes, nice cars. This is all just more money sinks.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we give people more money, then in all likelihood, they're just going to keep buying the same things that are keeping them where they are. We don't expect people in the lower class and the middle class to start spending all their money on houses and investments. They're probably going to be like, oh, hell yeah, I just got an extra $2,000 in my bank. I'm going to go buy I'm going to go put $2,000 down in a car that'll put me in even more debt, and I'll be paying off for the next 5 years.
Yeah. Or even if they had a fairly good decision, which was like, this is now 3 months rent I could save and keep, that rent still just gets filtered up back to top, right? So like, even if they made what is, depending on how you splice it, like a neutral decision, it still filters it back up to the people that own the building, right? Instead, it's a tough decision of like, do you invest that in a stock portfolio and really wait it out and hopefully that grows to triple and then you can pull it out for a down payment on a house or something like that, I think what that comes back to is, for me, that connects back to the kind of cycles we were talking about with like individual choice and stuff like, and everything that we were speaking about previously. For me, and personally, what's been the main crippler that would make me have bad decisions is not enough information. And that's partly why I think I do this and do everything I do, is maybe I'm backing up too much, but I personally consider myself more of the libertarian thought. I don't care what you do, just do your thing. And if you're not harming anybody and all that kind of stuff, full rights, do whatever you want. If you want to rise to the top and be an entrepreneur and make billions of dollars, do your thing. If you want to be a drug addict, do your thing, right? Like I'm kind of have a hands-off approach because I don't feel like it's my decision to tell people what to do, right? All I want for you is to have the most informed decision that you can, right? To see those two paths and say, if you take those couple $1,000s in the next 3 months and spend it on, well, even like $5,000, if like you're working and you're making $1,500 a month or whatever like that over 3 months roughly, you have roughly $5,000. If you take that and then over that amount of time slowly buy alcohol and drugs, I want you to know the likelihood of what that's going to pan out for you, how that's going to look, what that does to your health, what that does to just your outlook on life and everything like that. I want you to have a clear look, because we can kind of take averages across people that have done that in the past, especially at this point since we've had drugs in our society for so long, right? And then I also want you to see what is the chance of like putting that either into the stock market or into a business venture, buying something that appreciates for yourself, or saving it to start anything up, right? Like I want you just to have an informed decision. And I think that helps make you more conscious with that, which I think is also a connection to this that we've been talking about, where especially with the gym example, you're waking up in the morning and you're coming out of the unconscious state, and that's why it's a lot harder for people to wake up early in the morning and go to the gym, right? Because maybe if you're not used to it, you're coming unconsciously out and having to make this hard decision for a lot of people. But then if like maybe midday you're 50% consciousness, let's say, and you had the education of like, oh, this is going to help me if I continue to do this like once a week for the next 3 months, and it's going to snowball into something much bigger for myself, and you give the education of what that looks like for people, I think it makes them more conscious and they can break out of those cycles a lot more often,
Yeah,
is my take on that.
definitely spreading information about how your choices affect your life prospects is very important, especially if we're going to take a libertarian approach. So if we're not going to be controlling people's choices, absolutely one of our top priorities
Yeah.
has to be to make sure that people know where their choices are going to lead them. Yeah. And coming back to what we were talking about earlier, is it seems like sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't actually motivate people to do the right thing. Knowing what they need to do to have a good life. Sometimes it seems like knowing that actually does motivate them to do that, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people can know exactly what's good for them and yet still not do it.
Yeah.
Maybe they even want to do it. Maybe even the drug addict says, I want to get sober. But still, they can't escape the addiction, this self-reinforcing process.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, whatever this greater and more spread out education looks like, I think what helps come with that, if it's done right, is a better connection to community, where maybe you get a lot of information of all the possible choices and it's kind of theoretical at that point, but then you get to kind of meet maybe one or two people that took the two major routes that you could choose from, and you get to kind of see how they turned out, and you get an in-person example. And it's not to put a drug addict on a platform and say this person made a very bad decision, they're a bad person, but it's just for them. And it could be somebody that got sober and wants to be an example for people of, I made this bad decision, I would love, and there's a few of them out there like that, so it's not going too far to say that there would be somebody that would want to be in that position, right? Of say, I made these bad decisions. Talk to me, look at me, get to know me, and I'll tell you why all these things were not good for me, and I don't think they're good for anybody, right? And then you can see somebody that made the other decision and was like, I did all these things. I didn't even really know at the time, but it was very beneficial for me, right? And it made me get to this other place that I didn't even knew existed, and it's been much better for me and my family and everything, right? Right. And I think that education grounded in a sense of community and connection with people that have been through these experiences would be very powerful for especially like youth growing up and deciding what to do, right? And understanding where their decisions lead to the habits and paths that they will take them.
Yeah, because when you see a person who has really been through all of that, and especially if you can actually talk with them and directly engage with their perspective, that does have a profound effect on you, because it's like you've been touched by this perspective. You've been near it, and now it feels closer to you, like you could actually do it yourself. And this relates to some cool lectures I've been listening to the past few days about how wisdom isn't individual, it's communal and social and interpersonal. Because we can talk about, well, wisdom is, part of it is being able to choose the right things that will actually give you a good life. And we've talked about how, we're talking about how when you talk with other people, you can really be affected by them and actually be motivated and learn how to make these better choices. And that's because to actually become wise, you have to talk with people. You have to share in conversation and learn other people's perspectives to see how yours actually isn't seeing the world as it really is. Because we're all trapped in many different illusions, all different ones. And but because we've all got different illusions, that means we see the true things. All of us see different true things. And so by engaging with each other in conversation in different perspectives, we put our perspectives together and we see which ones within ourselves are illusions and which ones are actually seeing reality. You can't do that without other people, because you can't dispel your own illusions if you're trapped seeing your own illusions. It's only other people in conversation who can help you see, I see you're seeing it this way, but I don't see it that way at all. And then you usually, when you hear somebody tell you the truth, you just kind of know it. Just kind of know, oh, like, I guess this is an illusion that I'm seeing. I'm not actually seeing things the right way. And it was interesting. The lecturer is John Vervaeke. He's a psychologist, and he was talking about these studies of studies about wisdom. And it was like, how do we tell, how do people make wise decisions? So they made an experiment. They had one group, they had them imagine that they were having a conversation with a significant other about making an important decision. The second group, they actually had them have a conversation with their significant other. And then the third group, they just gave them more time to think about it. And they found that the first two groups significantly outperformed the third, and that they performed the same. That the people who just imagined it performed just as well as the people who actually had a conversation with that person. And he was talking about how this shows an amazing ability that we have, is that through sustained conversation with people, we can internalize that person's perspective and begin to engage with it in our own minds and imagine conversation, and we can actually learn something from that person's perspective.
Yeah. And the more, I think, experience you have and people you speak to, especially on a deeper level, I think you get and more just good information you ingest, I think you can have an easier time tapping in. Because to me, like, that first group was tapping into the higher consciousness or the meta consciousness that we all kind of have, that is just snowballing through our society perpetually by culture and our biology and everything like that. The ideas that are passed down through literature, and also
the parts of our consciousness that we share, that are shared throughout our whole society, throughout our nation.
Yeah. And almost what you try to tap into when you're like, I have this issue, what do I do? And you're kind of, I mean, you physically looked up at the heavens almost when you did that a couple minutes ago, right? So it's like looking at that higher thing above you, that collective consciousness, because it's not just your mind you're trying to tap into, you're trying to tap into almost every mind that's ever been and every mind that's currently being right now, right, is what you're attempting to do. And you can only tap into as much as what you've experienced. And so that's when you're by yourself, like you're talking about with the first group, or just talk to the person, which seems simple, but a lot of people don't do it, you know? And that's one of the biggest breakthroughs I had in my own personal relationships with people, especially with romantic partners, is when you have an issue with them, bring it up, right? Instead of letting it build to resentment. Be like, hey, you do this. Why do you do it? It kind of bothers me. Or you do this. I really like it. Can you do more of that, right? When you're speaking to somebody, especially somebody that could perpetually be the person you spend the rest of your life with, right? You really want to chip out those, you do these things and I really don't like it, or you do these things and I really, really like it, right? And so breaking those cycles as well, but then within a partnership, right?
Yeah, it's having a fully honest relationship with another person is what creates the best relationships. Because when you actually know each other's likes and dislikes, when you actually know who each other are, you know how to act better around each other. I think that why people don't do that, why a lot of people are afraid of it, is that that process is difficult, of actually having to be fully open and honest about who you are and about the other person is, because maybe you love the illusions that you're trapped in. Maybe your romantic partner, you see them in this way of like, they love absolutely everything about me and they'll never leave me, and they everything they do is for me and caring about me. well, maybe you're in love with that illusion because it makes you feel so comfortable and it makes you feel so safe, like everything's always going to be all right. And it's scary to actually ask that person, is like, could you ever see yourself outside of a relationship with me? If that person answers like, no, maybe I don't want to be outside of a relationship, but I could be. People don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
A lot of people really want
Yeah.
to stay in their illusions. Which is one of the questions I was talking about that I'd like to ask you is,
Mm-hmm.
do you think people would rather know the truth or be happy?
Yeah, I wrote that down because I remember you putting that when we were texting. My first thought was, I wonder if the question is better phrased happiness or meaning. Because I've had discussions with friends where they think happiness is the highest point to shoot for, and I usually battle against that, where I think like something more analogous to meaning then leads to happiness. I think like even if you make the promised land happiness, you should be always aiming for what is meaningful to then feel happy. Like, I don't feel happiness now, but this feels meaningful right now. Like, that's why I enjoy doing this. Or when you're in a really good section of a book, or I'm hearing a part of a video that's very meaningful, or I climb, so like getting to the top of a really good climb is very meaningful, right? And like yesterday, I actually got a route I've been really working on for weeks, and that was first, like, if I thought of like this then that, it was meaningful, and then I was happy, and I was only happy because I was meaningful, right? So I guess I kind of changed your question. I think like maybe the truth is a bit analogous to meaningful because it's the truth within reality, right? I was actually able to get my body to the top of that wall, right? That was the structure of reality, that wall, and I was able to change my body and get better in such a way that I was able to get to the top of that, right? And now it's true that I can do that route. I couldn't do it last week. That'd be untruthful to say that I could do that route, but now I can, right? So I think that answers your question.
Right. So I can understand why you felt the need to rephrase my question, because we're getting into some ideas that overlap with each other very deeply and are deeply entangled with each other. Truth, meaning, and happiness.
Yeah.
They all seem pretty inseparable from each other. We know they're different. We know they're not the same thing, but it seems like you can't have happiness without meaning. That you can't have what we would want to call like true, profound happiness without that being related to the truth.
Yeah. Because a form of happiness is euphoria, and I could get that quickly with a needle in my arm.
Yeah.
Right? And people would say, well, that's short term and that's fleeting. I was like, give me another needle and I'll keep going, you know?
Yeah.
Like, but it's not meaningful, right? Maybe in the moment it is, you know, but it's totally different than those weeks I put into understanding the route, understanding my body positioning and my weight balancing and the perfect grip that I need on things and when to move my feet when and everything like that to move up the wall correctly in the almost right symphony of body movement to get to the top, right? And it's a completely different feeling, even though maybe the words we use to describe them are analogous, right?
Yeah, because you think about in that process of learning to do the climb, you ask yourself, well, was I happy through that whole process? Well, definitely there were parts where you felt pretty stressed out, I'm sure. You think, I just can't get this route.
Yeah.
Or like, my forearms are burning, I feel so tired, and it's painful, and it's difficult, and it's stressful. And it's like, well, was I happy? Well, definitely wasn't pleasurable or comfortable, but when I think about that, like when I'm studying for the LSAT, and I'm like, okay, I got to sit down for 2.5 hours and take this test, and maybe I don't do as well as I wanted to, but I got to say, keep trying, and my score will get better. It's like, well, it's definitely not a pleasant experience, but I've started to think, well, maybe I am happy while I'm doing that, even if it doesn't feel like, joy and euphoria. I'm happy because I'm engaged in something that's meaningful. Because I know that what I'm working on, that even through the pain and the stress of it, that it will bring me to that state of joy and a deep sense of the purpose and meaning of what I've been doing. So you rephrase the question as, would we rather be happy or find meaning?
Yeah.
I think that you can't be happy in a deep sense without meaning. That you can have pleasure without meaning, but you can't have happiness without it.
Yeah. I think if you were to pursue happiness, you might as well just pursue meaning, and then you'll find happiness.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I wonder, because you can have a meaningful life that is full of just suffering, that is unhappy. Because the meaning of your life can be suffering. The meaning of your life can be sorrow. The meaning of your life can be repeated disappointments. I mean, you think like, whoa, what was the meaning of, I don't know, Joseph Stalin's life? Well, maybe it wasn't happiness. You see, he had a tyrant soul, and
Could it be like with that like dark meaning almost? Like
Yeah.
it was very meaningful, but in the most evil senses, some would say.
yes, you can have a kind of dark meaning, and that's I don't see that as connected with happiness. So what we aim for is, because like the suffering and sorrow, they are real, and what is real has meaning to it. So you can be in a reality of suffering and sorrow, and that is meaningful in
Yep.
those ways. But that's not the kind of meaning that we want.
Well, maybe. Because like you were describing earlier, failing on that wall 50, 100 times for me was a form of suffering almost. And it was very aggravating. Even like, they usually don't do it, but they changed like one piece of the route a little bit to make it a little harder. And I just felt like that was so unfair. Like if you were to like connect it to life, it was like an act of God of like, why is he doing this to me? You know? And I was just like, can I do it? And it was like, yeah, it's a little harder. It's a little worse, but I can do the move in solidarity. And I was like, okay, you can do it now connected, keep working the connections out, right? And so that was very painful and very stressing, because I was like, maybe I won't get this route. And this was one of the best routes for me personally that I've touched in months, you know? So it was like, maybe I won't get this route that I really loved because they just tweaked it a bit.
Like really
Yeah,
cool moves that
yeah.
you had to do to get it.
Yeah, they had a nice. I have a video on my phone of it. I loved it so much because I wanted to capture it. But yeah, it had a lot of unique moves to it. It was the right amount of challenging, but I knew I could do it, which is what you really want as a climber in a route. And it's so sometimes unique because routes can be so separate from you as a climber, so to speak, you know? So it's like, I know I can get this. I know I can't get it the first try. I know I can project it and maybe. And actually, that part of the wall was getting reset today, and I got it yesterday. So it was
Okay, so you got it just
I was
in
like, I
time.
need to get this today, or else I'm never going to touch it again because they'll reset the wall and be gone,
Yeah.
right? So all those things, like stressing on time, stressing on, am I able to do this? Stressing, is my body able to do this, you know? And through all that stress, like I got it and touched it. And I also have a video of it, so now I can look back on it and think that was a really meaningful time, right? So, yeah, I don't know if we're onto something with like the dark part of it, like with if you just put more good or evil into the world, both maybe are meaningful, but they're just different flavors of meaning, you know? I think for me personally, I'm very I guess, spiritual, but to me, I see it as just like waves of energy that always flow through. And so, like, and the Bible kind of connects this if you want some text to it, but like, I think like there's ripple effects from our actions that we do that we won't even know what affects, but even later down the road will either create good or bad. And it's, I think that also leans a bit on the more Eastern philosophies of the yin yang, where there's good within bad and bad within good, right? Where it's easy to cause bad by just doing bad things. Sometimes you do good things and they cause bad things, but maybe the best course is just to do good things, and hopefully the good things wave length into more good things, right?
Yeah.
It's easy to connect like bad to bad and then sometimes good to bad, because sometimes we're villains of other people's hero stories, so to speak. And maybe I'm rambling a bit now, but yeah, it's a tricky question.
Yeah.
I think some of that makes sense, though, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. It is a tricky question. I mean, like the lecture series that I've been watching is very much around. It's called Awakening from the Meaning Crisis.
Okay, I know that guy.
You know
yeah,
him, yeah.
He was on an interview. I listened to an interview with him. Yeah.
Yeah. He's a great psychologist.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, like he's exploring in that series like what is the relationship between meaning and wisdom and truth and happiness.
Yeah.
If I remember right, what he was saying when we say, well, I want to have a meaningful life, it's something like what we mean is we want to be deeply connected with the world, with ourselves, and with other people in a way that creates positive growth and creates happiness within ourselves and within others.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So there's a word that keeps coming to mind for me that would be what I think I would like my positive wavelength onto the world to be. I want to make a cultural shift. And how I see that partly, the words that come to mind to me are intellectual bodybuilder assassins.
Intellectual bodybuilder assassins.
Yeah.
Okay, so by people who are really healthy and really fit.
People that have perfectly knit their body and their intellectual together, their body and mind, that have the power to kill, but then also don't do that. Or at the very least, don't do it on people that are undeserving, right?
Yeah.
There's the line in the Bible, the meek shall inherit the earth, and I like Jordan Peterson's translation of that from
I've heard his translation of it.
Those who have swords but keep them sheathed.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's partly, and we can. I would love to talk about this with you maybe in a bit, with integration of the shadow, right, where you have all this
power. I can tell that you like Jung.
Yeah, and darkness, and it's well integrated, right? And like a Navy SEAL has crazy amounts of ability to kill somebody, especially if there's a firearm in their hands, but even just with their bare hands, what they could do, right? And they don't. They do their best to stop terrorism and save people and different things like that, right? And that's kind of, or firefighters and good police officers are good examples of those, right? Where they channel that shadow into really good things, and it's almost like channeling maybe even that negative energy inside to positive energy into the world that is very meaningful to them, right? And this connects to a thought I had where when the last Super Bowl was going on, everybody's talking about the game this weekend and when they're going to watch it and what food they're eating and the halftime show and all that kind of stuff. And the only I love being active, right? We met in the gym. I love to climb, did sports in high school. Never loved to watch sports. I never understood it.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Yeah.
I've never been into sports, but for a long time I have been really into fitness.
Yeah, yeah. And for me, I was like, how cool would it be if all these people were gearing up for a watch party of like the next meta-analysis dropping.
What's meta-analysis?
Within scientific studies,
Oh, okay. And that's when they take a bunch of different scientific
Yeah,
studies.
the
And
next
then,
scientific paper dropping, so to speak.
Okay, yeah.
But a meta-analysis would be multiple grouped up, right?
Mhm.
But just like the next paper coming out, right?
Mhm.
Like something very intellectual that people would have watch parties for.
Right, yeah.
To me, really strikes me as something really interesting, and I let my thoughts like kind of go down that path more of like maybe the authors were like superstars where they're like, oh, this guy from this particular field hopped on the paper with this guy from this particular field, and it's almost like Peyton Manning and LeBron James coming to the same court or something like that, right? Where you're like, big names are on this paper, right? So you could have almost like a lineup of superstars under the same journal almost. And even if maybe the paper came up inconclusive with their evidence, or so to speak, they had a tie in the game, there was still cheering and applause for good sportsmanship or the upholding of good scientific virtues as well.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if we could get people's collective interests to focus on things that are deeply beneficial for ourselves and for others?
Yeah.
Of learning, of discovering more truth in science, and all thinking about this together to further our pursuit of the
Yeah.
truth. It would be great if we could have our collective interests
Yeah.
aligned like that. But it seems that our collective interests largely align around things that aren't really so beneficial, that don't really have much long-term benefit, like, watching football games. There's nothing wrong with that. But we could imagine a world in which people are interested in not having a great time watching football, but having a great time learning something together.
Yeah. But even like a buddy of a buddy paid $1,500 to watch the Avs play at home.
Right. I remember my
And they
friend
lost
telling me
here.
how expensive that was. That's ridiculous.
And if I was in that position, that would just ruin my week. Personally, if they paid that much money to watch them win and they lose, and so now I'm out my money and my team didn't win, and it just like seems like such a net negative on so many different levels, and that's partly why I guess I don't go for sports. But like, I think to circle back, like, to me, these bad positive feedback cycles occur for people because of a lack of education. And so we get so wrapped up in sports and everything like that when sometimes we don't even understand ourselves. We don't understand interworkings of our society. Like, there's those fun videos where you see people ask questions about like the Constitution or stuff like that to Americans, and they don't know anything about like the structure of our law that everything's founded on and gives them the freedom to do or pursue whatever they want, or to pursue their ignorance almost, right? And it's not and it's not inherently a virtue to be knowledgeable, right? I don't think that's inherently
It's
true.
not a moral virtue, but it's an intellectual virtue.
Intellectual virtue, for sure, yeah. So that's personally my drive right now, is I want to see a shift in education and culture. And I think with what I just said, that has no mention of the schools, even though I think they need help. I think it maybe puts a little more emphasis, I think, on the family of what they decide to value within the household. I think that's a big thing for people. What people value interpersonally, whether it's spending $100 at the bar to watch the Avs win instead of cracking open a book or talking about what you're now processing internally with friends at the very least, or what you're now writing about the local issue that we have with the coyote population or our homeless population here in Fort Collins. Or there's like, I think like why I love that so much is there could be I think like at most the human race is working at 40% capacity. And I think that would increase our capacity if we focused on different things.
Right. Yeah. Well, what you were saying earlier about how you think that the importance of education, that education is really central to getting people to be able to choose and live better lives. This relates to a great idea that comes from the ancient Greeks, Plato especially, is that all badness, all wrong action is ignorance.
Hmm.
It's that people choose to do the wrong thing because they don't know what the right thing is. And that's difficult when we say it in the modern day because we have a very limited idea of knowledge. So we think, because what we were talking about earlier is you can know, we say, you can tell yourself in thought what the right thing to do is, but you still don't do it.
Yeah.
So that would seem to invalidate that all bad is ignorance. But it's that knowledge isn't just propositional knowledge. It's not just, oh, I know I should do this. I can put it in words. I can say it. It's a knowledge in a deeper sense is actually knowing how to do it and being able to do it in your actions. You could think about it as almost like like practical knowledge, like bodily knowledge of knowing how to do something. So like, I could like give you a whole list of propositions about how to ride a bike, and if you can repeat them back to me, you still can't ride the bike. You have to be able to do it. That is a deeper kind of knowledge than just the propositions you can generate from it.
Yeah.
And so with the all wrongdoing is ignorance, and that the solution to that is knowledge, isn't just that we just tell people in words what it is they need to do, but actually to somehow create this deeper transformation within them. Like we talked about how you can be touched by somebody's perspective and have your own perspective transformed by it, so that not only do they know propositionally what they need to do, but they know how to do it, how to act, what patterns of emotion and thought and action they need to engage with so that they can actually do those things.
Yeah. I think to circle back to where you get to see those two people that had those two different paths, you get to kind of connect with their story a bit, and I think that narrative kind of helps give people more of that practical knowledge of, if I want to be businessman, I need to do the first thing first, not straight to businessman, if that makes sense, right? Like I need to do this step and this step and this step to get there, because the way they look now, they've been doing this hypothetically 20 years or whatever. Their first step is completely different than their steps that they're doing now. So to just take that higher value and run with it, like you're saying, is not necessarily going to work out entirely, because there's those first dirty detail steps, right, that come first, right?
Yeah, and then you actually have to do it.
To do it, yes.
And then like I have this experience so often, is like I know what I need to do, and then I start doing it, and I'm like, wow, this is entirely different from what I thought it actually was, what I thought I actually needed to do.
Yeah.
Because when you start getting this actual like practical engagement with it, your whole understanding of the simple proposition totally transforms.
Yeah. That's something I found in my writing lately. I've been trying to write a lot more often, and I'll have an idea and I'll start writing and I usually won't even get to the original idea because it was so just how my brain works. It's so maybe big or farther out there. And I'm like, well, you don't even know about these 5 things to even get to there. I'm like, fuck, man, I gotta write like 4 more pieces before I even get to the original idea of what I was trying to get after. And then, I choose one and go down that path, and that'll suffice for now, right? Because we're limited by time. So that's something I've been finding in my own writing.
I have that experience a lot. It's like when the thought comes to me, I'm like, oh wow, that's perfect. Like it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
All I gotta do is just write that down. I start trying to write it down, and I'm like, okay, there's a lot of steps I have to get there to explain why it made so much sense to me in the first place. And I start trying to explain. I'm like, wow, there's like glaring holes in all of this thought process here.
Yeah.
It's like but before you actually start doing it, you think you know a lot more about it than you do.
Yeah. like even with all this, I was like, oh, it's just mics and camera and a recorder, and you're all done, and it's on YouTube. And no, there's this thing that connects to these, that connects to the Wi-Fi, or not, the headphone splitters and camera, and then syncing those in post, and all the other editing stuff. Like, I was like, whoa. And then to do it at, like, I'm at an amateur level right now. To do it at a professional level where, I don't know, you work with transitions and lighting and the audio and actually kind of like tune things up and yeah, different things like that, to where you're a bit more cinematic that some YouTubers get. It's like there is a lot more work that goes into this.
And you have to develop the sense, a kind of intuitive sense of how to do that well.
Yeah.
You don't just like start clipping the podcast.
Yeah.
And just making random clips. You have to have the sense for, oh, this was a good part of the conversation. Other people might be interested in this. You don't just get that from saying, oh, I just have to make some clips. You have to do it, and you have to learn it through the experience.
Yeah. And my ability to speak to people has already gotten better with, this is definitely over 20 now. I've done this now. And so how I don't know, talk, how I prepare for these things, what I tell people beforehand, is constantly getting changed, and how I think, because it's not, I try not to be rigid about it, because I want it to be kind of free flowing and fun, but also like, it's really bad. There's times where it's probably been only like 5 seconds, but where I've had complete blank brain, nothing to say, the other person stopped talking, dead air, and I'm just like, what do I do? You know, you gotta be, because it's, you don't think about it, but it's just you talk and I talk and you talk and I talk, and in a good conversation, like sometimes in this, there's been really good flow, you know, of like a back and forth, and time's flown by, and that's when I know I'm doing good. And then there's times where I'm maybe a little bit out of rhythm, and the person is done speaking, and I don't have something to connect to what they said, or different things. So how I've worked as a communicator has changed as well. You know, all these different things now have been an adaptation for me.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that will continue to be. At least I hope so, right? Like, the thing that comes to my mind is going to like your high school reunion after 10 years, and then they're looking at you and they're like, man, you've changed. And it's like, God, I hope so. You know, like after 10 years, I mean, I hope for the better, right? Not for worse, but God, I hope so, man. If I stay the same right after high school,
really hope I'm not high school me anymore.
So that's sometimes what I think about when I'm like, I've really changed, or at least I think I have. And I'm like, well, good. Especially if it's what I think is for better than my previous self, right? And to kind of connect back to what we were previously talking about, I think like when you're like, I slept in this morning, didn't go to the gym, and I am bad. It's like, compared to yourself, yes, that's the best comparison to make. I'm bad compared to this guy that's been going to the gym 2 years. It's a little more of an unfair comparison, right? But and then when you lift that 10-pound dumbbell, and then the next week try to lift the 15 and get it, you compare yourself to that previous person who's like, I can do 15 now, even though there's a dude curling 100 pounds over there. It's like, don't look at him, look at what you were previously doing.
The very wise quote of don't compare yourself to other people, compare yourself to who you were yesterday.
Yeah. And that's where, thankfully, very early, the philosophy of Stoicism I found. Just like little quotes and blurbs when I was in maybe middle school or high school. And that was very helpful for me. And that's kind of in your expertise, right? Being a philosophy major.
Yeah, I know. I've got a moderate understanding of Stoicism. It's actually the first philosophy I was ever into. It was in high school. I got Aurelius's Meditations.
Yeah.
I read that in high school. I didn't know anything about philosophy at the time. But I think I just found it at the Vanderbilt University in Nash bookstore, and I was like, oh, this looks cool. I'll just read through it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really liked it. And it has a lot of great practical, ethical advice of how to live a good life. And yeah, I learned a little bit about on it from a class I took on St. Augustine. He is very influenced by the Stoics. Yeah, I know a little bit about it.
Yeah. Kind of switching topics. What was it like growing up in Nashville? You said you're outside of the town, so more rural. Is that right? And what was it? what was it like? Like when you're a child growing up and then
Yeah.
going into high school and everything like that. What was that like for you?
So, as a kid, growing up there, I never really fit into it that much.
Like the rural nature of it?
The rural culture, the I very much loved the outdoors, as I still do. I lived in a bit of a forest, and there was a creek in my backyard that flowed on for a long time. And I loved going out with my friends and just exploring the creek, seeing like what different place we could find, and like building forts out in the woods and stuff. I loved that. But I was also very curious and had this really deep desire to learn and to, with my learning, accomplish something great in my life. It was always very vague when I was a kid. And I felt very limited in my small country town. And I didn't have the same interests as most of the people around me. Because most of the people in my hometown were very interested in stuff just like, you know, hunting, riding around, like doing dirt bikes and stuff, drinking a lot, going to football games.
Yeah.
Those stuff never really interested me. So I felt very limited there, and I always felt like I needed to get out. Like that if I stayed in this hometown, that I always told myself, like, if I stay here, my life is over. That I'm just not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So I knew that I wanted to go to a great college that would be able to turn me into the person who could do whatever these great things were that I wanted to accomplish in my life. So that's why I ended up applying to Boston College. I got a full ride scholarship there. And so I got out of it. And lately, since then, like I've definitely been finding though the parts about where I came from that I loved. Like I was just talking about, like going out in the woods and exploring with my friends out there. And like I always thought that I wish I grew up in a city
Yeah.
where there's actually something going on.
Yeah.
But I've come to appreciate the quiet life that I was able to grow up in, where I wasn't surrounded by all of this noise and technology that was constantly distracting my attention and getting me caught up in all the busyness and the noise that you get living in a city. I lived in Boston and I experienced that. And so what I appreciate coming from a smaller country town is that it allowed me to grow up being able to listen, to not be always so head down engaged in what's going on around me, but to look up and let things be quiet and let things be slow, let myself be bored and unengaged, and then in that listen and hear what comes to me. Like if I'm bored and sitting around, like I try and avoid as much as possible, like when I'm having meals, right, like half and half. I'll watch something, but very often, especially with breakfast, it's always quiet. I know I used to always get on my phone and watch YouTube videos to try and, I always tell myself I want to learn something. But I never really took much back from those because I was just kind of watching it and never thinking about it. It was just this kind of busyness that never really led to anything. And so I found that when I give myself time to just be quiet and be still is when I start to have all of these insights. When I empty my mind of all the busyness is when I start to be able to hear what we'd say maybe my unconscious is trying to tell me.
Yeah.
Or these thoughts that have been subsurface start to rise up, and I can finally see things that I've been seeing wrong. So definitely I appreciate that coming from a small town, it gave me that ability to be quiet and to be engaged with the beauty of nature and just listen to how that speaks to me.
Yeah. I found that best in the sauna these days. That's been really nice. I've been trying to go twice a week, and I think it's the steam, so I can't see. Half the time, nobody's in there. Half the time, if they are, they're very quiet, so no sounds. Can't see. I'll close my eyes even and just like visualize and picture, and sometimes go through what's going on in life and just process things, or think about an idea I'm trying to write about, or just kind of sit and see if something kind of pops into me. You know, sometimes just that higher consciousness kind of speaks sometimes, and that's, I feel very fortunate when that happens. But those times have been very, I guess, shaping, to say the least, for me lately.
Yeah, I love the sauna too. You're talking about the steam room, but
Yep.
this is the dry sauna. That's what I love, and it's broken at the rec right now. It's
It's
broken.
fixed.
Oh, they fixed it?
Yep, last week.
Oh, they fixed it last week. Okay, well, I'll definitely be going there again sometime soon. But yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about there's a philosopher who I've really loved reading lately. His name's Heidegger. He was writing in the 1900s. Really influential in our understanding of technology and artificial intelligence and human psychology. Like John Vervaeke, so much of what he's doing comes straight from Heidegger. Like I'll be watching, I'm like, that's from Heidegger, and he's like, and I got this from Heidegger, and I'm like, yep, knew it. But so one thing he talks about is in one of his essays called The Turning. And there's a line he says, we whose hearing is perishing under the dominion of radio and television. Forget what comes after it, but it was that line, and that stuck with me. Because he's talking about how true thinking is listening. And it's listening to what he calls being disclosing itself in its truth to us. And he thinks that's what humanity is, essentially, is those who listen to the disclosure of the truth of being, who are there to receive it, to bear witness to it. And what I'm talking about in this, like, this constant busyness and this constant, like, head down engagement, it's not really listening. Listening is when you can be in those quiet moments and empty yourself so that you can receive the truth that's being disclosed to you. And it just, like you say, like your higher self, your higher consciousness kind of just speaks to you.
Yeah.
So when you empty your mind and you just listen, then the truth discloses itself to you.
Yeah. With what you're saying with, I would watch a video, but it was just kind of busy work. I've been trying to, like, because I like to consume a lot, is what I found. What I've tried to do is to, I guess, keep consuming, but you'll have those, oh, that's a really good thing, I could implement that in my life. And then I've observed myself keep watching the video and totally lose that lesson I learned, that actual real lesson that I learned. And then you lose that. And I've been trying to either stop the video right there, or there's a book I'm reading right now, and the first 3 chapters kind of sum up into one lesson for you, and the first 3 kind of are for you to understand yourself more. And the first 3 are like to feel your self-identity and everything like that. And so I haven't touched that book, even though I want to read it again, because I'm still really trying to understand my self-identity to help kind of move forward into what I want to do. I have some ideas, but I really want to have a very firm grasp. Right now has been lately what my mind has been on. And so I'm not going to touch that book until I figure it out, because I know it goes on to, okay, now you've understood yourself, keep going, because it's Patrick Bet-David's Your Next 5 Moves, it's called. And so that was move 1 is self-identity. And so I'm trying to figure out what even my move 1 right now is, to figure out myself.
To try your hand at finding your own answer.
Yeah.
And you know it's probably not going to be a very good answer if you haven't studied and learned beforehand, but to try and give your own answer. so that then you actually, in your reading and in your learning, have something to compare against,
Yeah.
something to develop,
Yeah.
instead of just all the information passing in and passing out and nothing ever really coming of it.
Yeah, because I could read that book as almost a pleasure read of like, ooh, these are all these things that I could possibly implement and
Yeah.
never implement them,
Yeah.
right? He has this 14-page self-identity questionnaire, and I finally did it this morning. The start was like, you need to set out at least an hour's worth of time uninterrupted to work through this whole thing. Took me 3 hours this morning of just going through different questions that he had. It was 14 pages, and I wrote them on my computer, and I think I wrote like 7 pages worth of stuff about myself. So I've been really trying with that. I guess is what I'm trying to say with that. I didn't realize there was so much I didn't know, and there's still to be known, because I consider myself to be pretty introspective, but I guess not enough, or there's just more to process and think about, you know? But that's been the journey currently for me right now. That's been what's been on my mind.
Yeah. So like we were saying earlier, when you actually start engaging with it, trying to understand myself,
Yeah.
you thought you had a pretty good idea of it. When you start getting into it, you found, wow, I'm way more complicated than I thought I was.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot more introspection to actually figure myself out.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how early did you know you wanted to get out of Nashville? When was that first thought of like, I don't know, understanding where you were and understanding you needed to be out of there at a certain point in time?
I think it was probably like late middle school, early high school.
Okay.
There's one memory that I have specifically of when I feel that turn happened. And I was sitting on the school bus, and I remember the thought. I want to accomplish something great in my life. I want to be a part of history. I don't have to be like one of the great figures, like an Alexander or a Plato. But I want to do something noteworthy enough that I'd be in a book somewhere. That I would be remembered by history for something. And definitely I think about that a lot. It's like, what do I mean by that? And why do I want that? But yeah, it was around then when those thoughts came to me that I wanted to accomplish something that would be noted by history.
Yeah.
That's when I felt, okay, well, if I live here, I'm not going to become the kind of person that can do that. I have to go somewhere where that history is, where those great people have been. I have to go to Boston College, where I can learn about the culture that I've grown up in and the great thinkers who have contributed to it, so that I can learn from them and actually be within and close to that greatness and that history, so that I can actually develop something out of it.
Yeah. What is your sense of that noteworthy thing you're going to do?
I'm trying to think like what level to put it at, to say it at.
You could start very low resolution and then add detail.
Yeah.
That works.
It's related to the meaning crisis that we're having today.
Yeah.
In this sense that we've lost, as a society and as a culture, a shared understanding of what is good and true. That in our individualism, we have broken apart from each other. And we all live in separate worlds now,
Yeah.
our own separate self-created worlds, where we have our own individual truths and our own individual goals. And we don't feel like we have to accommodate those to other people, or that we have to accommodate those to our society or our culture. We can be whoever we want to be, and nobody can tell us what to do. And I see that breakdown in connectedness, in a shared world and a shared understanding, is one of the most deep problems that are leading to all of the problems that we see at the surface level in a day. The depression epidemic, suicide epidemic,
Yeah.
the breakdown in political conversation, and this return to tribalism, that all of those are manifestations, symptoms of this breakdown in a shared world, in a shared understanding. And so what I want to be able to do with philosophy is to find a way to find a path towards recreating that shared world. And yeah, my thinking very much centers around that, because I see that we can't totally abandon the past, what has led us here, because that is what we are. The past has created us. We have been created by our culture and the history that led to us. But then a lot of that history we have found, or that culture, that world, we have found to be false, or we have found to be unviable for us. We can't live it anymore. So like with my struggle with my faith is trying to find, well, I know there's something here in the Bible and in Christianity. It's been with us for thousands of years for a reason. There's some kind of truth in there, but the way in which that truth is given to us no longer speaks to us. The stories in the Bible, we read them and we think that they're trying to be a scientific or historical account. That's not what they're trying to be. They're trying to communicate to us some deep ethical truth, or some truth about reality. And so in my struggle with my faith, is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to recover what is in those and to bring it into the light of what we know today. And in philosophy, I'm trying to do that, reading the ancient Greeks and reading the Enlightenment philosophers, trying to discover what they were trying to tell us in their time and in their language, and trying to recover that and bring it back today so that we can use it. And we all already share this, because we all share this past, and trying to bring what this shared past is into today in a way that people find viable, in a way that people feel that they can live it, and that would allow us, in sharing that feeling of we can all live this, that we could live it together.
Yeah. What is, like, do you have a sense of what that looks like? Like, do you have an idea of how you're going to target? Because you've identified the issue, but do you have an idea of what you're going to either target to demote or promote to hopefully lead us into this?
Yeah, vague ideas. So we were talking about earlier about the importance of how wisdom comes from conversation. And so I think conversation and dialogue and a real engagement with each other and a shared pursuit of the truth is the first step towards that, of how are we going to determine what is good and what is true. And I think that dialogue really plays a central role to that. And this comes from the ancient Greeks. is that the logos, which is this disclosure of the truth in conversation, is that through conversation we are being almost like inhabited by the logos, and it exists between us within the conversation, and that is what is disclosing the truth. And so, yeah, my vague idea of how we can come to a shared understanding of what is true and what is good is that it has to come from conversation. It has to come from truthful dialogue. But then I run into problems of, well, if there is a single truth, or if there is a single good, then won't say we have different cultures, different nations engaged in dialogue, won't they come to different conclusions? Or would they? Or if we engaged in a global dialogue, would we come to the same conclusions? Or, these are very expansive questions that we are very much struggling with in our culture today. Is there one good, or are there many goods? Is there an actual true morality, or is it all relative? Yeah. And so I'm trying, like, I'm not, in my thought, I try not to dismiss any of those. Even if I think moral relativism is wrong, I try not to dismiss it, because there's something in that people are seeing, and there's a reason they believe that it's true. And so I'm trying to, in my thought, synthesize these together to find what we are all, in different ways, trying to get at, what truth we're trying to get at.
Yeah. Can you define logos for people?
There's a lot of different thinking about it.
Yeah.
But the way I like to think about it is that the logos is that which inhabits people in dialogue, and which discloses the truth to them in their shared pursuit of the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that.
How close is it to being rational or rational thought?
Very close. Very close to rationality.
Are they not quite similar?
I might be wrong about this, but if I remember rightly, logos in Greek is the word for rationality and dialogue. It's the same word.
Okay.
I might be wrong about that. I don't know Greek. But yeah, that reason is this to be reasonable is to have your mind and your actions, your being properly fitted to the truth of the world. And so maybe we could say is that by engaging in the logos is what allows you to become a rational person. Because by having the truth disclosed to you, you can then be rational and fit yourself to that truth and live in accordance with it.
Yeah. So I know you're still forming this, but is that just like have more conversations with people would be your, I don't know, takeaway to people of like to be in that pursuit of the logos between the people you know and the people in your family and in your friend circles and in your community, to just have more conversations with them, to more truthful conversations as well? Is that what you would recommend?
Yeah, that I have a faith that there is some truth that is apart from whatever I want to believe that it is. And that I am extremely ignorant. And that if I try and find that alone through just taking more time to think about it with myself, I'm not going to be able to find things that I can't see. And it's through engaging in conversation with other people, through people who have had different kinds of truths disclosed to them, that we can start to work our perspectives together. And by working many different perspectives together, then we can take the truth from all of them and discover it.
Yeah. Last time I was at work was Thursday. I was supposed to get off at 7 after an 11-hour shift, and my boss was supposed to get off at 6, and we continued to talk at work. We had to get off the clock because that's not fair to work, but to talk for 4 hours straight, and it was just a spontaneous dive into that dialogue of logos. And what was unlocked for them was something I presented to them, which was a scarcity abundance mindsets, and they realized they were taking a very scarce mindset to a lot of the things that was holding them back. And that was the revelation for them. And for me, it was, I've been trying to puzzle out for years why at one time I was very resentful of my parents, but now just like questioning my upbringing, I guess, so to speak. And there were things unlocked from talking with them of things for me I've been trying to sort out for years of like, why do I feel this way? And I consistently feel this way. So it's not nothing, you know? And it's consistent, and I feel like I've forgiven them, and then it still like pops up as something that still wiggles in my head. So it's something I gotta process through, but like whenever I put thought to it, like I can't connect anything to it. And then finally things were connected in that conversation. So that's what came to mind when you're talking about speaking to people, and then they learn something and you learn something, and it's very truthful and from different perspectives, right? I came in with mine, and I've thought about what scarcity and abundance mean to me and outlined that to them, and then they map that onto themselves and learn something. And I don't know what the particular thing from them connected to it, but I was able to connect and figure out what was it felt like like if I was in a video game and I unlocked the next level or something like that, you know?
Yeah. It is so strange how that happens, that you can go into a conversation believing these things to be true, and in the process of engaging in that conversation, somebody else tells you something, and you're like, wow, that's actually more true than what I believe.
Yeah.
And you can't really explain exactly why. It's this sense of like, that is more in contact with reality than what I have believed to be true.
Yeah.
And so that's why I want to believe that the logos, because I ask, well, where is it? What is it? Where does it come from? Is it something that's entirely within us? Is it just like some kind of subjective truth that we're just projecting on the world? Is it some kind of objective principle or spirit out in the world that interacts with us in dialogue? And I think that these concepts are entirely inadequate for it. I don't think subjective and objective will ever get us to where is the logos. But it has to be something that is higher than our own beliefs, because what's happening is in conversation, what I like to say is the logos just reveals to you that, I've been wrong about this, and you just know you've been wrong about it.
Yeah.
And so it's like, where does that come from? because it wasn't from you, the you who believed all of these incorrect things. It didn't just, it's not something that's like out there in the world that just came down from on high and then told you like, hey, that's actually true.
Yeah.
It's somewhere in between.
Well, I think what
I don't
you're
know.
connecting to is idea I got from Jordan Peterson again, which was it's like this thing that he said he's observed where people go up to him and they're like, you've said things that I've been thinking but now actually can articulate, right? And it's like it's either like felt or instinctually felt or spiritually felt, or there's no verbiage applied to it, but like it's internally experienced though. And it probably was relating to external experience, right? And then you internally experience it, and it's one of those things that comes back. And it's one of those things you might find in dreams, or you might be working on something completely out of the blue, it hits you, and it's one of those like brain parasites that kind of wiggles into your ideas again. And even if like you've forgiven the person, sometimes it wiggles in. Like you've made settlement in your own consciousness, and it still comes back, right? And then you have that aha moment, and it's like, oh, you said things that I've been thinking, but you actually said them, and I wasn't able to say them before. Like it's now articulated. You know, that's what always comes to mind for me, or what I feel like you're connecting to.
There was something that I had a sense of, that I was trying to come up with the words that could represent the meaning of what that thing is that I have a sense of.
Yeah.
But I can't get the right words. I can't map the meaning on to what it is I'm trying to describe. And
Yeah.
so somebody says it in this new way, and even though you didn't know clearly what it was you were trying to describe, when they say it in that way, it lights up.
Yeah.
And you know that's what it was.
Yeah.
How do we know that? How is it that we cannot know something, and yet when the truth is given to us, we just know that that's right?
Yeah.
This is a big question in Plato's dialogue, the Meno. It's asking, well, it's this dilemma. If you don't know what you're looking for, you'll never find it. But if you know what you're looking for, then there's no need to search for it. So what is it we're doing when we're questioning? What is it we're doing when we're trying to find the truth? And he comes up in his answer, and it's, I don't think Plato means this seriously, but he's trying to motion at it as a metaphor. He says that all learning is remembering. And he comes up with this myth about it. It's like when you are learning something, you are remembering the truth that you knew before, like it was in a past life or something. And the only way he has of getting at it is through this myth. Because it is this very odd thing, is that we cannot know what we're looking for, and yet know when we found it. And where does that come from? And I think, I might be wrong about this, but I think Plato's answer is that it comes through the logos.
Yeah. Does this higher value or entity or thing that we're trying to chase or tap into, does that have to be religious, do you think?
Well, we definitely have to know what we mean by religious. How I try to separate them, I get this from Vervaeke, the psychologist I was talking about, is called it, what was it, credo and religio? Some is like, there's like, you have the religious doctrines, you have the propositions of a religion that have been set down as canon. It's like the kind of this what like forms organized religion. You had this shared set of doctrinal beliefs that form the Christian religion or the Muslim religion. But then there's this different aspect of religion, which is the ongoing connection with the spiritual, this connection with the living God, and actually not just reading the words or the propositions or the doctrines, but actually having the spiritual reality or having God speak to you through that, it directly into you. There's a difference between the set historical and not living doctrine and the living spiritual pursuit of truth.
Okay. For me, I kind of better fortified in this when I was talking to my boss in that long conversation about why I do my best to interact with the world from a place of abundance as opposed to a place of scarcity. And I think what connects to that is it's sort of I think a Christian idea of just being itself is good.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that's put into being is good.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any take on that of why or why not being is good?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, is that there's this, and it feels to us deeply right, because when we believe that being is good, that being is filled with truth, we can understand it, it's filled with love and it cares, and that if we venture forth into it and take risks, that usually it's going to turn out better. And when we can live within that belief, it feels deeply right to us, because it feels like it connects us, meaningfully connects us to the world, and it comes to seem true.
It's interesting to me that you made a almost value judgment that it's good, because like circling back on the example we've been using, there's the person that stayed in bed and the person that went to the gym. And I think like I think personally for me, the best way to assess what people believe is to look at their actions. And so I think if you're truly the type to go to the gym, you would be at the gym. At least part of your week is at the gym. And if you're the type to stay in bed, you'd be in bed, right? And so the type of being you choose to put into play, to me, shows your belief and your virtues and your values more than anything else in order to do an assessment on somebody, right? Or if it's on yourself. Like, do I actually believe that I am choosing the logos when I can? Am I having good conversations with people, right? If you have one a week and you know you could be doing 5 a week, then it's like, maybe I don't believe this as firmly as I thought I did, right? To connect it to something else, you know?
Yeah, definitely people's actions, their way of being and acting in the world expresses what they actually value, expresses what they actually believe to be true. And thinking about your question earlier, so is it right that being is good in itself? Well, depending on the mindset, the perspective that I'm in, the answers seem different. Because when I'm happy, when I feel that my life is meaningful, and I feel that things fit together, then it does seem to me that being is good. It's disclosing itself to me as good. I don't try and make it good, but it just happens that it's revealed to me as that, yes, these all fit together. These are meaningful. This is something I should be happy about. And then when I'm in a bad mood, then I think thoughts like, yeah, that's what you have to believe to survive, to actually live a successful life. All the people who didn't believe that, they didn't make it, and we don't care about them. All the people who believe that being is bad and that trying to succeed will only result in failure, they all died. And we don't care about the ones who died. We only care about the people who are living now with us, and about continuing into the future. And so we think that being is good. That seems to come to a truth as us, because that's the thing that the people who mattered believed was true. These are the things I think when I'm in a bad mood. And when I'm trying to come out of that, often it seems like I'm trying to convince myself of something that I know is empty. That I know when I'm in a bad mood, I'm like, well, if I want to keep going, what I have to believe is that it really is meaningful, and that I really should be happy about it, and it really does fit together, because otherwise I can't be happy. And so, unless I plan on dying tomorrow, I guess I'm going to have to start believing that being is good again. And in those moments, it feels like I'm just trying to convince myself of something that I know is wrong. But then when I actually get there, when I'm actually seeing it as fitting together and meaningful and being happy, then it seems true.
Can you give an example to make it more practical?
Yeah. Let's see.
Either in yourself or something you observed?
Yeah, so like relationships. If I like a girl and I get rejected, oftentimes the thoughts will come to me that, and vaguely, it's like, oh, love's not real. Love is just some kind of selfish desire for your own survival and propagation in a kind of biological, evolutionary way. It's just some evolutionary trick that comes from outside of me that pushes me together with some person, and there's no actual real concern for the other person aside from your own self-interest. And so when I'm in those bad moods like that, it seems like love is really just empty. Like it's really just all this cloudy emotional disguise for something that really in itself is not meaningful. It's just the propagation of the species. But when I actually feel myself in love, then that all just seems like foolishness to me. It's like, no, clearly this is real, and clearly I care about this person, and clearly they care about me, and this is meaningful and good and fits together. And I still haven't figured out what to do about those two entirely opposite perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's been interesting to me that you put like a feeling attached to it, where I've had thoughts of, why aren't I getting more views on this video? And I think, well, what does that mean? It just means I'm not good enough yet. And it's actually not comforting, but it's comforting in the sense that it gives me direction, and it says there's room to grow, there's room to learn. You can be better at editing or speaking or whatever it takes to be better, right? Because the metric is to get more eyeballs on things, in a sense, not to just worry about numbers. I love just doing what we're doing now, but I'd also love to see that more people are benefiting from conversations that are being had and listen and keying in onto those, right? And so if something gets 100 eyeballs, then that's like, okay, how can we get 1,000, right? And it just means the state of me and my being and how I interact with the world is not good enough yet. Is how it articulates in myself, I guess. That's how I think of it. If I try to talk to a girl and get her number, she says no, like I'm not good enough. But not in a judgmental way. It's that I maybe divulged too much deep information that scared her off, or I maybe had a tone that was too serious or not playful enough or too playful, or there's so many different things that, or it was just a bad day for her, or she's not attracted to men, or all kinds of things, you know. But, and like for the she's not attracted to men thing, I'm not good enough, and that's fine, because I'm not going to want her to be attracted to me if that's not what she likes. If she would rather be with a woman, then I'm not good enough, and that's okay, because she needs to be with the person she's actually attracted to, right?
Yeah, and it's not that you're not good enough in a general sense, but just in that specific context.
Yeah. So there's like I guess the phrase like I'm not good enough gets a bad rap, and I get it for good reason, but at the same time it's like there's so many things outside of us, kind of like drawn off stoicism, that we can't control, that it's just, for me, it's just like a time to reflect and do better and figure out how to adapt to it, right? That's how I personally look at it.
Yeah. Well, what you were describing earlier is when something goes badly, so it's right. It would be right to say that you tend to look within first.
Yeah.
To see, was it something that I was doing, a mistake I was making. I think that is a really good mindset to have. So when things are going wrong in your life, first try and figure out, is it a problem of how I am being in the world? Is it a problem with how I'm living or how I'm seeing things, especially when it's a recurring problem?
Yeah.
And that is, even if the problem isn't within yourself, that's a much more helpful way of trying to solve your problems than immediately blaming the world.
Yeah.
'Cause you can't change the world.
Yeah.
You to a very limited degree can you change other people. And so when you have a problem, the first thing you do is, well, other people need to change or the world needs to change, you're not going to get very far. But if your first thought is, maybe there's something wrong with me, then you can actually do something about that. And then it is difficult balancing when you have that mindset of being able to decide, well, no, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And I'm always very hesitant to do that.
Yeah.
Like, I think through it and I say, no, I can't find anything. It couldn't have been something wrong with me. It was just the circumstances or the other person. But yeah, I think when you take the mindset of looking within first, that is one of the most difficult, at least in my experience, one of the most difficult things to do.
Yeah.
Is when to know that it's actually somebody else's fault.
Yeah. In my personal life, like taking a page out of what we do scientifically is like do my own performance of a multivariate analysis on certain problems, where the example I love for this is this is now years ago. I was having dinner with a bunch of friends, and jokingly I had a friend say that I was very cheap, and they did it in like a very bombastic and attempting to be funny way. And I mean, I could have rolled with it, but for me it was like hit me, because it felt more like a personal dig, and it's like stopped me in the moment, and I like went on with the night, but then like later wanted to reflect on it, and then I was like, well, am I cheap with my friends? And so there's 6 other people in the room, and I texted all of them. I was like, do you think this is true? And they're like, no, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm like,
Mm.
oh, okay. Okay. So I got multiple perspectives, multivariates. You know, I checked in with myself, could check in with that friend, could check in with the 7 other people, 6, 7 other people in the room, and get all the multiple perspectives. And, you know, there's a line in the Bible, I think, with that. But anyways, yeah. That's,
Yeah, and it's the much more difficult way to think, because what's happening is your friend says that you're cheap, and then instead of saying, "What an idiot, he has no idea what you're talking about," you actually let it bother you. You call it into question. It's like, wait, I didn't think I was, but he said I am. Am I cheap? And calling it into question, that produces anxiety, because you don't know what the answer is.
yeah.
You've been disoriented.
Yeah.
And now you have to try to find an answer. And I think still that is the better way to approach it than just shutting it down. It's better to remain open to being wrong. And that's much more difficult because it leads you to having to be anxious a lot more of the time. But I think it's good to be able to be comfortable with anxiety.
Yeah.
And to be able to call yourself into question so that you can actually learn the truth.
I think for me personally, I don't feel anxiety towards those things. I don't know if that's a gift or something I've habituated to, but I think for most people it is. I mean, within the last 3 weeks, there's been multiple times different friends have been like gearing up to be critical, but in like a loving way. Like they're like, I see this in you. I'm like, this might be bad for you. Like in a very loving way, critical of me. And they're like, I don't want to hate, or they're like prepping me. I'm like, I get so excited when those moments come. I'm like, every time I'm like, I don't care about the prep. I'm like, I'm ready. Like, tell me,
I want to learn
tell me
something.
like what's going on. Like, what do you see in me? Because I get so like a puppy almost. Like, what is it? Like, and usually whenever it drops, depending on what it is, I just get curious. I'm like, okay, you say this, but what about this? And they're like, oh, this, that, and then maybe it reinforces it or kind of strikes it down a bit to where it maybe they just need more perspective on the criticism, you know? But for me personally, there's no anxiety with things like that. I get very excited.
Yeah.
Personally.
I guess I'm meaning something different by anxiety. I think what we normally, when we talk about anxiety, is a kind of fear of something bad happening. A fear of something out there, of things going wrong. It's like, well, if like somebody is like gearing me up to tell me something about myself, then the anxiety as we normally think about is like the fear is like, oh, like this is gonna like destroy our friendship, or I'm gonna see that I'm a bad person, and there's nothing I can do about it. Anxiety, I'm thinking, is more of, in a philosophical sense, is almost like this uncertainty, a lack of things not fitting together, of yeah. So like this being in unsureness, this being in a question.
Yeah. I find comfort being in question, personally. I think it is I think you are being more precise with your words. When you get into that state, you get uncomfortable, and then before, I think then it can lead to anxiety. And I think for a lot of people, sadly, it does, to be introspective or to question beliefs or themselves or different things like that. And for me, especially lately, and maybe it's a recent thing for me, but in general, I love being in that place. Personally, I love, because it's, I don't know what it is. It's real. It tunes me up a bit more.
You feel like it's an opportunity.
It's
for growth.
it's a huge opportunity. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. Yeah, because I'm always searching for growth, through YouTube, through videos, through books, through these conversations, through knowledge and experience, right? And you have a friend, and my friends hopefully know me at least a little bit, and so you have somebody coming with to you, and to me, it's like growth on a silver platter,
Mm.
so to speak. Like, feed it to me. Like, don't even give me an appetizer of, oh, I'm just looking out for you, or I don't want to criticize you or anything. I'm like, no, give me the main course.
Mm.
Like, I want it now. Like, it's almost, there's no patience.
Yeah. Yeah, and like that is a great mindset to have.
Okay.
It's like Heidegger, when he talks about anxiety, it's, yeah, I hope I'm getting this right. It's something along like, when the world is emptied of understanding, when it no longer makes sense to you as it did before. He says anxiety, it's not like fear. Fear is about something, and you can appropriately be fearful about something, but anxiety is about nothing, and it's nowhere, and it comes from nowhere. Because it is a fear about nothing. It is a fear about the lack of understanding, about things not making sense. So when your friends are going to say, I want to tell you this about you, something bad about you, then your understanding of yourself, your meaning of your life, it's called into question. It
Yeah.
becomes an emptiness. But he says that we should always be open to anxiety, because that is when we are listening. That's when we are listening to the disclosure of the truth, to the call of being.
Yeah. And I think it feels, how do I want to say this? The beauty of our consciousness is that we can have ideas of our possible selves and see which one will die within our brains, and then we could choose the one that lives. You can visually picture yourself walk off a cliff, and what happens, and you take a right turn and don't walk off it. And then you can, in your head, create a you that dies, but you're not harmed in actual reality, right? And so maybe, and then what? To have that friend call you into question brings you up, but it's not there's no physical cliff. And that's, I think, why I get so excited, is there's no real danger. And even if they're right, then that's like information for you to change. If they're wrong, you can dive into how wrong they are, right? If there's some truth into what they're saying. I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's like the safest, because if they're spot on with what they said, and you have to totally pivot for yourself as a human, then the life path that you were on does die, and you go on a different life path, right? And there is a self-death that occurs there. So, but that's the safest death we can maybe manage, like, at the utmost, right? Is that I don't know if the right word is like intellectual death or conceptual death, or what a good phrase to tag on it would be, but it's the safest, right? Where it's like, oh, I need to flip a 180.
Yeah, I'd say the death of your understanding.
Yeah,
Your understanding of your life path.
Yeah.
Of who you will be and who you are.
And it's the safest time, because, I mean, half the time they're telling you when you're in a nice, a beautiful apartment in air-conditioned AC, and you're just sitting there, and they say it to you very softly, because it seems like right now these days there's a big affront to, like, doing that, and it's like a form of judgment on somebody or something like that. Like, but I don't know. To me, I love that kind of stuff. I wish there was more of that. I do my best to give my own perspective and guidance to friends when I think it helps, and I would love for them to give it to me when they think when they personally think it'll help me, right? And there's again, that logos or that dialogue between two people. And it helps when it's somebody that's been in your life for years and they know you, they know your habits or your goals, what you want to accomplish or have accomplished, and can take that into account when they give feedback
Hmm.
and constructive criticism.
Yeah, show you something that you can't see.
Yeah.
I had an experience like that. This was at the end of my freshman year. It's what made me switch from a physics major to a philosophy major.
Okay.
I was doing physics, and I was pretty certain I'm gonna keep doing physics major the rest of college. I've got my courses planned out. I know where I'm going. I'm gonna go into research afterwards, and it's gonna be my life. I'm gonna be a theoretical physicist. That just makes sense. That's who I'm going to be. That's who I am now. And then I was walking around campus talking with it's a lifting friend, and we didn't know each other super well, just kind of. And I was telling him about what I want to do in my life, and he said, "Wow, I really can't imagine you being a research physicist. Like, you just don't fit in with that." This is a short little comment. I didn't really talk about it with him, but it just hit me. And I was like, he's right. Like, I've got this whole picture of myself, of who I'm going to be and who I am, and it all makes sense. And then he says this little thing, a guy I don't really even know that well. It's like, I just can't see you being that. And then against all of my own desires and my beliefs, it hits me and I'm like, fuck, he's right. And then I went through an extremely difficult time over the next year in regards to that in my life path. I was like, I feel like I've had it all worked out for like the last 3 years, and now this little thing just has called it all into question. And I can't put it away. I can't go back to where it all made sense, and I can't see myself there now.
That brain worm almost,
Yeah.
right? It's a parasite.
And so all the time, I'd be going to my advisor. He's a philosophy professor, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do now. And it took a long time for me to actually work out what I wanted to do. For a while, I wanted to be. I was like, oh, I'm going to be an economics major. I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I'm going to make a lot of money. And then I found that what was really motivating that was just this desire for security, just to
Yeah.
have enough money to be comfortable and not have to worry about anything. But then I found that wasn't actually going to make me happy. And then it was 2 years after, in my junior year, and I was reading Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And as I was reading it, it called to me. And I was like, what he's doing here is what I want to do. This is what I can see myself doing. And it just pulled me in. It just pulled me into philosophy.
Yeah.
It's like this guy predicting all of the things that our cultural consciousness has been going through for the last 200 years, 40 years before it happened. This is what calls to me. And that's what I've been doing since. And so it wasn't that I ever wanted to become a philosophy major. I started off doing philosophy my freshman year just to get the core classes out of the way.
Yeah.
And then somehow that little tiny comment just called everything into question.
Okay. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. It's those things that like wiggle into your brain, and as much as like you might have planned or you don't even want it in your brain or anything like that, it's just like, get out of my head, and you can't. So you got to own up to it, right?
Mm. Yeah, and like, you know, in that situation too, like, first glance, doing philosophy is a way worse plan. So, you know, you go into physics, that's a pretty well-respected degree and pretty
Yeah.
useful in today's current society. It's like, and then philosophy calls to me. Well, aren't those like the people who get joked about all the time working at Starbucks?
Yeah.
It's like, why in the world would I totally break down all the self-understanding I have of being a physicist to go pursue this totally uncertain and socially unrespected,
Yeah.
often unrespected pursuit?
Yeah. Yeah. It's been great talking to you, dude.
Yeah, it's been great
I've
talking to you
really
too,
enjoyed
Bosh.
this conversation. I think we could do more of these as well, especially if you come upon more antidotes to the meaning crisis, so to speak. I would love to dive into those if you come to more ideas that you would like to pursue through our dialogue, as I think we both agree is a very meaningful thing for us to do and for people in society to do, right? I'd have you maybe think of your question in wrapping up, and also I will ask you the previous one. I think it was really specific. It wasn't too broad. I wonder if you'll even know. Oh, yeah. What do you know about Project MLK Ultra?
Oh, that's I was watching a documentary my friend recommended to me. It's called Wormwood. Yeah, MK Ultra. It was the CIA and the U.S. government were experimenting on people, giving them LSD to try and see if it could work as a truth serum. See if this altered state of consciousness would get people to tell the truth. And the documentary I was watching was this guy was a scientist with the U.S. Army working on biological weapons that were being used in Korea. And they did the experiment on him. I don't know, maybe it was to see if he would divulge any of that information. But he really started losing it because they were like gaslighting the whole time. It was like, no, you're going crazy. Like you're failing the experiment.
Yeah.
And he ended up, or the story was that he killed himself, but it seemed the documentary gives some good evidence that actually the CIA killed him, because now that he had this experiment done on him and he knew all this information about the biological weapons, they had to get rid of him.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely not the prettiest part of our nation's history.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Do you have a question? And you can have multiple if you would like.
Yeah, let me try and think for a second.
Yeah, feel free to think.
I'm trying to think that I would like to ask the question I started off with, like, would you rather be happy, or would you rather know the truth at the expense of your happiness, and why would you want that? And I'm also trying to think, like, how could I work into stuff about like logos and dialogue into a possible question? It's like
something like, how could you have more dialogue-driven conversations with those around you? Is it something like that? Like almost a call to action type question? Is that what you're looking for?
That might be good, yeah. Like how could you have more honest dialogues with people? How do you think that would affect your life?
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah. I like it.
All right.
Awesome. Nash, it's been great talking with you. Thanks for coming on. Do you want to promote anything, any social media channels or projects or anything like that as, I guess, a last word for people? Do you want people to go somewhere to find you or anything like that, or are you good on all that kind of stuff? This is the time, I guess, to do it if you would like.
When I write a book in 20 years, remember my name.
Okay. I'll have you on maybe for that. How about? Awesome. Thank you, everybody.